June 23rd, 1314, the English heavy cavalry, the most feared military force in medieval Europe, thunders across Scottish marshland. Their target, a ragged army one-third their size, led by a king with a price on his head. In less than 48 hours, this field will become England's graveyard. This is Bannockburn, and it begins with an insult. King Robert the Bruce stands alone on horseback, surveying the boggy ground south of Stirling Castle. He's been excommunicated by the Pope, branded an outlaw by England, and hunted like an animal for 8 years. His kingdom is a bleeding wound. His army? 6,000 Scots armed with 12-foot spears and desperation. Facing him, Edward II of England commands the largest invasion force ever assembled against Scotland. 25,000 men, 3,000 heavy cavalry in full plate armor. The wealth of an empire on horseback. Edward isn't here to negotiate. He's here to erase Scotland from the map. The math is grotesque. 4 English soldiers for every Scots fighter. The English war horses alone outweigh entire Scottish formations. Military scholars would call this a predetermined massacre. Edward calls it a coronation march. But Robert the Bruce has spent 8 years learning a terrible lesson. England's strength is also its weakness. Those magnificent horses, useless in swamps. That heavy armor, a death sentence in the mud. That arrogant cavalry doctrine, predictable. The Scots have no cavalry, no archers, no supply lines. What they possess is terrain knowledge and a leader who understands that sometimes the only way to kill a giant is to make him drown in his own weight. As the English vanguard approaches, Bruce makes a decision that will echo through 7 centuries. He won't retreat. He won't surrender. He's going to funnel 25,000 enemy soldiers into a killing ground disguised as a battlefield. The trap is set. The English don't know it yet. Tomorrow, the most lopsided victory in medieval warfare begins. Tonight, 2 armies sleep within sight of each other, one confident in their overwhelming power, the other sharpening stakes and digging pits in the dark. June 23rd dawn. The English army wakes to the sound of their own power. 25,000 soldiers begin their advance toward Stirling Castle. The ground trembles. This isn't a march. It's a migration of steel. Knights in full plate armor sit atop war horses bred for one purpose, crushing infantry beneath iron-shod hooves. Squires adjust straps. Archers count arrows. Foot soldiers joke nervously because everyone knows this won't be a battle. It'll be an execution. Edward II rides near the vanguard flanked by England's greatest nobles. The Earl of Gloucester, the Earl of Hereford, men who've never tasted defeat. They're arguing about who gets to strike first, who will claim the glory of breaking the Scottish lines. It's not strategy. It's a competition for bragging rights. But there's a problem nobody's discussing: the terrain. The direct route to Stirling forces the English through a narrowing corridor between the Bannockburn stream and the New Park forest. Marshland, soft ground, the kind of earth that swallows armored men. Bruce has chosen this landscape deliberately, and the English commanders know it. They just don't care. Why would they? Scotland's entire army could fit inside England's cavalry division. Then the omen arrives. A Scottish knight, Henry de Bohun, spots Robert the Bruce riding ahead of the Scottish lines, alone, lightly armored, an impossible target. De Bohun is young, ambitious, and he sees his moment. Kill the Scottish king before the battle even begins, end the war with a single lance thrust, become a legend. He lowers his lance, spurs his war horse, charges. Bruce doesn't retreat. He wheels his smaller horse toward the charging knight, waits until the last possible second, then sidesteps. De Bohun's lance passes harmlessly. Bruce rises in his stirrups and brings his axe down onto de Bohun's helmet with such force the axe handle shatters. The English knight collapses, dead before he hits the ground. 25,000 English soldiers watch their champion die in single combat against a king on a pony. The Scots erupt in war cries. Bruce holds up the broken axe handle, grinning. The psychological battle just ended. Scotland won. The first rule of medieval warfare: heavy cavalry doesn't charge prepared infantry. The second rule: English knights don't follow rules. June 23rd, afternoon. The Earl of Gloucester is furious. Bruce's killing of de Bohun wasn't just an insult, it was a challenge. Gloucester demands immediate attack. King Edward hesitates. His military advisers warn against frontal assault on marshland against prepared spear formations. Gloucester calls them cowards. Pride makes the decision. 300 English knights, the cream of European chivalry, form up for a cavalry charge against the Scottish schiltrons. These aren't desperate farmers. These are professional killers in 60 pounds of steel armor, mounted on animals that cost more than villages. Each knight represents a military investment equivalent to a modern tank. They charge into the Carse. The Carse is a deceptive flat plain that looks solid, but hides water-saturated earth and concealed pits. The Scottish spearmen lock shields, lower their 12-foot spears at precise angles, and wait. They've drilled this formation for months, 4 ranks deep, spear points creating an impenetrable hedge of steel. The knights hit the schiltron at full gallop. Horses scream. The sound is unnatural, a noise that doesn't belong in nature. War horses impale themselves on Scottish spears, their momentum driving the blade through chest plates and into vital organs. Knights are thrown forward, landing face first in mud. The second wave of cavalry can't stop. They crash into the first wave. Chaos compounds. Scottish spearmen step forward, thrusting downward at fallen knights. The gap between helmet and gorget, the armpit joint, the groin, anywhere steel doesn't protect. English nobility dies in Scottish mud, drowning in armor they can't escape. Gloucester's charge shatters, not against stone walls or superior numbers, against discipline and terrain. The survivors retreat in disorder, leaving behind the twisted wreckage of England's military doctrine. Bruce watches from his position. He hasn't committed his full force yet. This was reconnaissance. The English just taught him their battle plan. They'll sacrifice everything for glory. Night falls. Both armies hold position. Tomorrow brings the main event. June 24th, dawn. Edward II faces the worst decision of his reign. His cavalry probe failed catastrophically. His commanders are divided. Retreat means humiliation, admitting that Scotland, a kingdom England has brutalized for decades, just beat the largest invasion force in British history. Advance means pushing 25,000 men through a narrowing kill zone against an enemy who's already proven they can break cavalry charges. Edward chooses pride over strategy. The English army will advance in full force. The Scots watch the human avalanche approach. Bruce has positioned his 4 divisions, called, quote, 0, in a formation that shouldn't work. He's placed his infantry forward, using terrain to compress the English into a frontage so narrow their numerical advantage becomes meaningless. It's tactically insane. It's also the only way 6,000 men can fight 25,000 and survive. Edward Randolph commands the Scottish left flank. He's defending the Carse, the same marshy ground that swallowed yesterday's cavalry. Thomas Randolph holds the center at St. Ninians. The English must break through both positions to reach Stirling Castle. The English vanguard reaches the Bannockburn. This is where the plan collapses. The stream isn't wide, but it's enough. Crossing forces the English into a compressed column. Archers can't deploy properly. There's no room. Cavalry can't maneuver. The ground won't support charges. Infantry bunches up, shields overlapping, creating a human traffic jam and killing range of Scottish spears. Thomas Randolph's schiltron advances, not defensively, offensively. The Scottish spearmen march forward in lockstep, spear points bristling, pushing into the compressing English formation like a blade entering flesh. The English can't retreat. Their own army blocks them from behind. They can't advance. Scottish spears are 12 feet long. They can only die. The Earl of Gloucester, still raging from yesterday's humiliation, leads another cavalry charge. It's magnificent suicide. His horse goes down in the first seconds. Gloucester, in full plate armor, tries to stand in knee-deep mud. Scottish spears find him. England's greatest commander dies in a ditch. The English army, designed to dominate open battlefields, discovers it can't function in a phone booth. Bruce hasn't even deployed his reserve yet. This is just the warm-up. June 24th, mid-morning. Bannockburn stops being a battle and becomes a slaughterhouse. The English army is now fully committed to the Carse. 20,000 men compressed into a space designed for 5,000. They can't retreat. The Bannockburn blocks escape routes behind them. They can't advance. Scottish schiltrons form an advancing wall of spear points. They can't maneuver sideways. Their own density traps them. This is what happens when an army designed for open field dominance gets funneled into a meat grinder. The Scottish spearmen don't stop. They push forward in rhythm, stepping over corpses, driving the English backward into their own ranks. 12-foot ash spears probe gaps in armor, find throats, find eyes behind visors. The sound is industrial. Metal on metal, wood splintering, men screaming, orders nobody can hear over the chaos. English archers finally find shooting positions on the flanks. Arrows arc into Scottish formations. Men fall clutching shafts through shoulders, through legs, but the schiltron doesn't break. Wounded soldiers are dragged backward. Fresh fighters step forward. The formation holds because it must. If it collapses, Scotland dies. Then Robert the Bruce makes his most audacious decision. He sends Keith's light cavalry, 500 horsemen, straight at the English archers. It's a suicide mission. Light cavalry against massed longbowmen should end with Scottish horses pincushioned with arrows. But the archers are positioned on soft ground. No stakes, no defensive preparation. They're so focused on shooting into the schiltrons, they don't see Keith's riders until it's too late. The Scottish cavalry crashes into them at full speed. Archers scatter. England's ranged advantage evaporates in 30 seconds. Now the English have no mobility, no ranged support, and no room to use their numerical superiority. The grinding intensifies. Scottish spearmen step forward, thrust, step, thrust, mechanical, relentless. English knights in plate armor discover that 70 pounds of steel becomes a coffin when you're knocked down in mud. They can't get up. Scottish daggers find the joints. Edward II watches his empire's army self-destruct in slow motion. He's lost control. His commanders are dead or isolated. His soldiers are dying in a traffic jam of their own creation. The grind continues. Bodies pile in layers. Midday, June 24th. The English army begins its death spiral. What started as tactical compression becomes strategic catastrophe. English soldiers at the front are being killed by Scottish spears. English soldiers at the rear don't know what's happening. They keep pushing forward, compressing their own army tighter. The center becomes so dense that men suffocate standing up, crushed by the weight of their comrades' bodies. Horses panic. War horses trained for battle still possess animal instinct for survival. They rear, throw riders, trample foot soldiers. A single panicked horse creates a domino effect. Suddenly, 50 men are knocked down, and in this density, falling means dying. The Bannockburn becomes a barrier instead of a landmark. English soldiers trying to retreat find the stream banks collapsing under weight. Men in full armor step into water that's 3 feet deep and discover they can't climb back out. The stream fills with drowning knights, their armor pulling them under like anchors. Edward II faces the moment every medieval king dreads. His army is breaking, and he's powerless to stop it. Bruce recognizes the tipping point. He commits his reserve, the 4th Schiltron that's been waiting in the New Park Forest. Fresh Scottish spearmen march onto the battlefield singing psalms. It's psychological warfare. The English hear organized singing and see fresh troops advancing while they're exhausted, disorganized, and dying. Then the, quote, zero appear. These are Scottish camp followers, servants, supply handlers, civilians with no military training. They've been watching from the hills. They see the English collapsing and smell victory. Thousands of them grab improvised weapons, axes, clubs, farming tools, and charge down the hillside screaming. The English see what looks like another Scottish army appearing from nowhere. It's an illusion, but perception is reality in battle. English morale shatters completely. The retreat begins. Not ordered, not organized. Primal. English soldiers drop weapons and run. Knights abandon horses. Noblemen throw away identifying heraldry to avoid capture for ransom. The army that marched confidently toward Stirling Castle 48 hours ago becomes a stampede of terrified men fighting each other to escape. The crisis has arrived. England's invincible army is routing, and there's nowhere to run. The English retreat becomes a massacre. Scottish spearmen pursue the fleeing army with methodical brutality. This isn't combat anymore. It's hunting. English soldiers running toward the Bannockburn find the banks lined with Scottish fighters. Men dive into the water anyway, preferring drowning to spear points. The stream runs crimson with the aftermath. Some English knights make it to their horses and gallop toward the Forth River, hoping to ford it and escape north. The Forth is tidal. They reach it at high tide. Horses plunge into deep water. Riders in full armor sink immediately. The riverbank becomes a graveyard of England's nobility. Edward II is physically dragged from the battlefield by his bodyguards. The King of England, sovereign of the most powerful realm in Europe, is fleeing on horseback while his army disintegrates behind him. His bodyguards form a protective circle and fight their way toward Dunbar Castle, 60 miles away. Edward escapes with roughly 500 cavalry. He abandons 24,000 soldiers to their fate. The Scottish pursuit continues for miles. English foot soldiers scatter into the countryside. Some are hunted down by Scottish light cavalry. Others are killed by Scottish peasants who emerge from villages with generations of grievances and whatever weapons they can find. English archers who terrorized Scotland for years die begging for mercy from farmers with pitchforks. At Stirling Castle, the English garrison commander watches the destruction and makes a cold calculation. Edward's relief force is gone. He negotiates surrender with Robert the Bruce. The castle that England spent millions defending is handed over without a siege. The Bannockburn battlefield itself becomes impassable. Bodies stacked so deep that Scottish soldiers can't pursue without climbing over corpses. Wounded English soldiers, trapped under dead horses or pinned by armor they can't remove, call for help that won't come. The June heat accelerates decomposition. The smell becomes unbearable within hours. By sunset, the most complete military victory in Scottish history is over. 6,000 Scots just destroyed an army 4 times their size. The English didn't lose a battle. They lost an entire generation of military leadership. Bruce stands at the edge of the carnage. He's won. But victory looks like hell. June 25th, the day after Armageddon. Robert the Bruce walks the battlefield. Scottish soldiers are stripping corpses, not from cruelty, but necessity. Scotland is poor. Every piece of English armor, every sword, every horse that survived represents wealth Scotland desperately needs. English nobles captured alive are worth ransoms measured in castles and land. The dead are buried in mass graves. There are too many for individual burials. The treasure haul is staggering. Edward II's personal baggage train, abandoned in the retreat, contains the English royal seal, state documents, gold plate, and enough coinage to fund Scotland's government for years. The Earl of Hereford is captured alive. Bruce will trade him for his own wife, sister, and daughter, held prisoner in English cages for 8 years. But the real turning point isn't tactical. It's psychological. For 8 years, Robert the Bruce was an outlaw king hunted across Scotland. His legitimacy was questioned. His support was fragile. Bannockburn changes everything. Scottish nobles who hedged their bets now commit fully. Common soldiers who fought out of desperation now fight out of belief. Scotland stops being a geographic expression and becomes a nation forged in English defeat. England, meanwhile, enters a spiral. Edward II's authority collapses. Nobles openly mock him. The military doctrine that dominated Europe for a century, heavy cavalry supremacy, is suddenly questionable. If Scottish spearmen can destroy England's best knights, what does that mean for feudal warfare itself? Bannockburn proves that discipline beats numbers, that terrain beats technology, that leadership beats wealth. Medieval military theorists will study this battle for centuries, trying to understand how 6,000 infantry defeated 25,000 combined arms. Bruce uses his victory strategically. He launches raids into northern England, devastating the countryside, forcing English nobles to pay protection money to Scottish armies. He negotiates with France, forming the Auld Alliance that will shape British politics for 300 years. He secures papal recognition of Scottish independence. The turning point isn't just military. It's the moment Scotland stops fighting for survival and starts fighting for dominance. 1 battle, 2 days. The entire balance of power in Britain permanently altered. The weeks following Bannockburn become a race to consolidate power. Before England can retaliate, Bruce moves with ruthless efficiency. Every Scottish noble who supported England is hunted down. Their lands are confiscated and redistributed to Bruce's loyalists. There's no forgiveness, no reconciliation. Scotland can't afford internal division. Traitors are executed publicly. Their families are exiled. The message is clear. Scotland is united now, or you're the enemy. Stirling Castle becomes Bruce's headquarters. From there, he coordinates a strategy that transforms defensive victory into offensive campaign. Scottish raiding parties cross into England, targeting not military installations, but economic infrastructure. Mills are burned. Harvests are destroyed. Livestock is stolen. Northern England experiences what Scotland endured for decades. English nobles in the border regions face an impossible choice: pay tribute to Scottish raiders for protection or watch their estates burn. Many choose payment. Scottish gold starts flowing north, ironic reversal after centuries of English taxation draining Scotland's wealth. Edward II tries to raise another invasion force. He can't. The disaster at Bannockburn killed too many nobles. The survivors refuse to fight in Scotland again. English Parliament blocks funding. Edward's kingship becomes ceremonial. He has no military credibility left. Bruce, meanwhile, is transforming from guerrilla leader to statesman. He establishes a Scottish Parliament, creates administrative systems, negotiates trade agreements, commissions the Declaration of Arbroath, a document that articulates Scottish sovereignty in terms that will influence the American Declaration of Independence 460 years later. The final push isn't another battle. It's the systematic construction of a functioning, independent state on the ruins of English ambition. By 1320, Scotland isn't just militarily independent, it's politically sophisticated, economically recovering, and diplomatically recognized. The kingdom that England tried to erase from existence is now dictating terms to its former conqueror. Bannockburn's legacy isn't just military. It's the birth certificate of Scottish national identity. Before 1314, Scotland was a geographic expression with contested sovereignty. After Bannockburn, Scotland is a nation, defined not by English permission, but by Scottish defiance. The final push was never about territory. It was about proving Scotland had the right to exist. Robert the Bruce dies in 1329, 15 years after Bannockburn. He's 54 years old, ravaged by what historians believe was leprosy. On his deathbed, he asks his closest friend, James Douglas, to carry his heart to Jerusalem, a final crusade he never completed. Douglas dies fighting in Spain. Bruce's heart is recovered and brought back to Scotland, buried at Melrose Abbey. Even in death, the outlaw king who humiliated England remains a Scottish legend. But Bannockburn's legacy transcends one man's life. The battle fundamentally altered medieval military doctrine. Heavy cavalry, the dominant force in European warfare for centuries, suddenly looked vulnerable. Infantry armed with long pikes became viable against mounted knights. The Swiss will perfect this 40 years later. The English will learn the lesson and develop longbow tactics that devastate French cavalry at Crécy. Politically, Bannockburn established the principle that a smaller nation could resist imperial conquest through superior strategy and national will. Scotland remained independent for another 400 years, not through English generosity, but through demonstrated ability to make conquest impossibly expensive. The Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton in 1328 finally grants formal English recognition of Scottish independence. Edward II, humiliated, deposed, and ultimately murdered by his own nobles, never recovers from Bannockburn's psychological damage. His son, Edward III, signs the treaty and effectively admits what the battle proved. Scotland cannot be conquered. Modern Scotland still remembers. Bannockburn is national mythology, songs, poems, monuments. The battle where impossible odds were overcome through leadership, discipline, and refusal to accept predetermined defeat. Military historians study it as a masterpiece of terrain exploitation and combined arms integration. Political scientists examine it as a case study in asymmetric warfare. Scots simply know it as the day their nation earned the right to exist. 6,000 men, 2 days, one battlefield. 700 years later, Bannockburn remains the proof that power doesn't always belong to the powerful. Sometimes it belongs to those desperate enough to rewrite the rules, smart enough to exploit weakness, and brave enough to stand when retreat seems rational. That's the legacy. That's Bannockburn.